Hello, dear listener. Before we dive into this thrilling story about consequences and personal transformations, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to our channel. Each subscription is like a seed planted in our garden of stories, and believe me, just like the journey you're about to hear, small actions can lead to significant changes. Now, let's get started. Robert Mitchell watched his daughter out of the corner of his eye as she walked through the living room of the mansion. Emily wore that familiar expression he knew so well, a calculated smile, eyes that avoided direct contact for too long, and that nervous habit of tucking her blonde hair behind her ear. It was the same behavior she had shown since her teenage years whenever she wanted something. Beside him, Brandon stood with his hands stuffed in the pockets of the Italian leather jacket Robert had bought him last Christmas. His son-in-law tried to appear casual, but the tension in his shoulders betrayed the seriousness of the situation. "Dad, we need to talk about something important," Emily began, sitting down on the cream leather sofa opposite the armchair where Robert sat. She smoothed her Gucci skirt, another gift from him, and flashed that smile that used to melt his fatherly heart. Robert adjusted his reading glasses and closed the folder of documents he had been reviewing. At 62, his graying hair contrasted with the tanned skin typical of someone who spent time on the golf courses of Austin. Decades of building an empire of car dealerships had not only provided him with financial comfort, but also given him a sixth sense for business and people. "Of course, dear. What's it about?" he asked, though he already suspected the answer. Brandon finally sat down, leaning forward with his elbows resting on his knees. "Mr. Mitchell, we're in a complicated situation," he said, trying to sound professional. "An investment opportunity that didn't go as planned." Robert nodded, keeping his face impassive. For 8 years, he had heard variations of this same story. A unique opportunity that ended in disaster. A small, temporary problem that just needed a little push. He had already lent the couple $847,000 without ever seeing a cent back. Emily cleared her throat. "We need $500,000, Dad, by noon tomorrow." The silence that followed was as heavy as fresh concrete. Robert noticed that for the first time, they weren't even pretending it would be a loan. It was a demand. "And what if I don't have that money available?" he asked, calmly. Brandon straightened up, his face hardening. "That would be very bad, Mr. Mitchell. There are serious people involved in this situation, people who don't take no for an answer." His voice dropped to almost a whisper. "It would be a shame if something happened to the family's reputation, or worse." Robert felt something break inside him. It wasn't fear, it was the last shred of hope he still held for his daughter. For years, he had rationalized her behavior. Emily was just impulsive. It was his fault for spoiling her after the separation from Margaret. She would mature eventually. But now, watching his own daughter silently nod at Brandon's veiled threat, Robert realized this moment was inevitable. The plan he had been preparing for months wasn't just necessary, it was an act of love in the only form that might still work. "I'll need a few hours to arrange the transfers," he finally said. "You can come by tomorrow at 11 to pick up a check." Emily stood up, her face lighting up with relief. She approached and kissed her father's cheek. "Thank you, Dad. I knew we could count on you." As he watched the couple leave, Robert didn't move from his armchair. Only when he heard the engine of the Porsche Cayenne, when he had bought for Emily on her birthday, drive away, did he allow himself to close his eyes. By 11 o'clock tomorrow, he would be thousands of miles away, starting his new life. It was time for Emily to face the consequences of her choices. The glow of the computer screen illuminated Robert's face as he finalized the last details of his plan. The wall clock read 1:45 in the morning, but sleep was far from his mind. His thoughts remained clear, focused on the sequence of events he had meticulously orchestrated. On the table in front of him, a red folder contained all the documents organized chronologically. Bank transfer receipts, printed emails, screenshots of text messages, unfulfilled promissory notes, a complete documentation of 8 years of emotional manipulation and financial abuse. A story told in numbers and empty words. Robert swiveled in his chair and looked at the packed suitcase by the door. He was traveling light, just the essentials. The rest of his belongings had been sent weeks earlier to his new home in Nosara, a small paradise in Costa Rica where he planned to start over. He stood up and walked to the window. The affluent neighborhood of Westlake Hills slept peacefully under a Texas starry sky. This house, with its 5 suites and lake view, had been his refuge for 20 years. Leaving it wouldn't be easy, but it wasn't as hard as he had initially thought. His phone buzzed with a notification. The driver confirmed the pickup at 4:30 in the morning for the airport. His flight to San Jose would depart at 6:45, 4 hours and 15 minutes before Emily and Brandon arrived, expecting their financial rescue. Robert returned to the table and opened a second folder, navy blue, containing copies of the deeds to Emily and Brandon's house. The property worth $1,200,000 in Tarrytown that he had given as a wedding gift 6 years ago. The couple didn't know it, but Robert had never officially transferred the deed. 2 months ago, he had legally registered the property in his own name, paying all necessary fees. Next to this folder was a third one, black, containing the recordings. This had been the most challenging part of the plan, but also the most revealing. With the discreet help of a private investigator, Robert had collected recordings of Emily and Brandon talking about him. "Daddy is like an ATM on legs," Emily said in one of the recordings, laughing as she sipped champagne with friends in an upscale restaurant. "I just need to cry a little and he'll sign another check." In another, Brandon was even more cruel. "The old man is pathetic, thinks that by buying Emily he'll win her love. Just wait until he kicks the bucket and we'll take everything at once." Robert closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. The pain of those words still reverberated, but now it only served to confirm that he was doing the right thing. An hour later, he finished preparing the large box he would leave on the porch. Inside were all the organized folders, along with the letter. It wasn't a letter of anger or accusations, but simply the truth. Cold, documented, and undeniable. Along with it were the credit cards Emily used, all cut in half. His final act was to access his online banking and make the last transfer, a deposit into the trust fund he had created for Emily years ago. The money would be inaccessible for 2 years, long enough, he hoped, for his daughter to learn some valuable lessons. As he prepared one last cup of coffee, Robert glanced at the photo above the fireplace. Emily, at 8 years old, smiling with 2 missing front teeth, sitting on her father's lap. Did that little girl still exist somewhere inside the woman Emily had become? He had to believe so. This plan wasn't punishment. It was his last attempt to save his daughter from herself. The clock read 3:30 in the morning. It was time to start saying goodbye. The sun was still just a promise on the horizon when Robert stepped into the executive taxi. The driver, a middle-aged man with sleepy features, loaded his suitcase into the trunk while Robert took one last look at the house. 20 years of memories were left behind, some sweet, others bitter, all part of who he was. "Austin Bergstrom International Airport, sir?" the driver asked. Robert nodded, adjusting his watch. 4:32 in the morning. Everything was on schedule. During the silent drive through the deserted streets of Austin, Robert mentally reviewed every detail. The box was strategically placed on the porch, protected from the light rain that was beginning to fall. His lawyer already had all the necessary instructions. The tickets were confirmed. There was no turning back. Upon arriving at the airport, the check-in and security procedures went smoothly. By 6:15 in the morning, Robert was seated in the VIP lounge, watching the planes on the runway through the panoramic window, a cup of black coffee in his wrinkled hands. His phone buzzed. It was a message from Emily. "Good morning, Dad. We're looking forward to sorting everything out today. Can we arrive earlier? Brandon is nervous. Hugs, your princess. Robert reread the message 3 times. Your princess. The nickname he used when Emily was small. How did she know exactly which emotional buttons to press, even now? He didn't respond. The next contact Emily would have with him would be through that box full of truths. At 6:45 sharp, Robert boarded the flight to San Jose, Costa Rica. When the flight attendant asked him to turn off his phone, he did so without hesitation. The bridge had been burned. While Robert's plane crossed the Gulf of Mexico, Emily was waking up in her luxurious mansion in Tarrytown. Beside her, Brandon slept soundly, the effects of the previous night's drinking still evident in his heavy snoring. Emily checked her phone. No response from her dad. Strange. He always replied to her messages, especially when she used "your princess." A slight discomfort settled in her stomach. "Brandon, wake up," she shook her husband. "Dad hasn't replied to my message." Brandon grunted, rolling over. "He'll pay, he always does." Emily bit her lip, uncertain. "I think we should go earlier. I have a strange feeling." At 9:40 in the morning, almost an hour and 20 minutes before the agreed time, Emily's Porsche pulled up at Robert's mansion. The first thing she noticed was the silence. No sign of her dad's Mercedes SUV in the garage. The second thing was the large box on the porch, protected from the rain by the overhang. "What is that?" Brandon asked, pointing at the box as they got out of the car. Emily approached cautiously, as if the box might contain something dangerous. On the lid, her name was written in her father's impeccable handwriting. She looked at Brandon, who shrugged and headed for the front door. "It's locked," he announced after trying the doorknob. Emily used her key, but it didn't work. "He changed the locks," she murmured, anxiety rising. Brandon returned to the box and opened it unceremoniously. Inside were the color-coded folders and the letter on top. Emily took the envelope with her name and opened it with trembling fingers. "Emily, for 8 years I watched you and Brandon destroy your financial lives while I enabled your irresponsibility. That ends today. In this box, you will find all the documentation of our financial relationship. $847,000 in loans that have never been repaid. The deed to the house you live in, which is in my name. The recordings that reveal what you really think of me. There will be no more $500,000. No more rescues. It's time for both of you to face the reality you've created. I will always love you, Emily, but I can no longer allow you to continue on this path. Sometimes, true love means saying no. Your father, Robert." Emily dropped the letter, her hands shaking uncontrollably. Brandon was already rifling through the folders, his face paling with each document he examined. "He has everything here," Brandon murmured, holding up a folder. "Everything about my gambling debts. How did he find out?" Emily didn't answer. She was paralyzed, staring at the credit cards cut in half. Her entire life, built on her father's generosity, was collapsing like a house of cards. When Brandon's phone rang, the shrill sound cut through the air like a knife. He answered with a trembling voice. "Yes, I understand. No, we'll have the money." His face lost whatever color it had left. "We need more time. Please." Emily knew then that her world would never be the same. 3 weeks passed like a slow-motion nightmare. Emily sat on the floor of what was left of her living room in the Tarrytown mansion, surrounded by half-filled moving boxes. The eviction notice, delivered by an impassive sheriff 10 days earlier, was crumpled beside her. "You have until Friday to vacate the property," the man had said, avoiding direct eye contact. "All remaining belongings will be considered abandoned." Brandon had disappeared 15 days ago. A hastily scribbled note was his farewell. "I need time. I'm going to Mexico. I'm sorry." The gambling debts he had hidden from her totaled not $500,000, but $720,000. The creditors, men with rough voices and thinly veiled threats, were now calling her. Emily picked up her phone for the 1,000th time, dialing her father's number. As with all previous attempts, the automated message replied, "The number you dialed is no longer in service." Her email, her social media, all blocked. It was as if Robert Mitchell had vanished from the face of the earth. The doorbell startled her. Through the window, she saw a woman in a suit holding a folder. More problems. "Ms. Brandon Collins?" the woman asked when Emily opened the door. "I'm Vanessa Ramirez from Central Texas Bank. We need to discuss the situation with your financed vehicles." Emily nodded mechanically, inviting her in. There was no more pride to preserve. Both vehicles, the Porsche Cayenne and the Audi RS, are 3 payments overdue, Vanessa explained, consulting her folder. "Unfortunately, the bank needs to repossess them immediately." "But how will I get around?" Emily asked, her voice thin as paper. Vanessa offered a professional smile. "Austin's public transportation is quite efficient, Miss Collins." After the bank representative left, Emily looked around the almost empty house. The designer furniture had been the first to go, sold online for a fraction of its original value. The designer handbags, Louboutin shoes, jewelry, everything converted to cash to survive. The next day, carrying only 2 suitcases, Emily got into a taxi headed for the only place she could afford, a tiny studio in East Riverside, a neighborhood she used to describe as where the people who clean our houses live. The irony didn't escape her. The apartment was smaller than her old closet. Peeling walls, a worn-out sofa bed, a kitchenette with cracked tiles, and a bathroom where she had to squeeze in to close the door. $280 a week, paid up front. Sitting on the edge of the sofa bed, Emily opened her wallet. $235 remained, enough for another week's rent, maybe some basic groceries. After that, the abyss. That night, after hours of staring at the damp ceiling, Emily made a decision. The next morning, she put on the simplest clothes she owned and went out to look for a job. Nordstrom at Barton Creek Mall, where she used to spend thousands on impulse buys, was her first stop. The manager, a man she vaguely recognized as someone who had attended to her before, looked at her makeshift resume with skepticism. "You don't have any sales experience," he observed. "I can learn," Emily replied, swallowing her pride. "I really need this job." Maybe it was the desperate sincerity in her voice, or perhaps just luck, but he nodded. "We have a part-time position, $9 an hour plus commission. You can start on Monday." It wasn't enough. Quick calculations showed she would need another job. 3 hours and 7 rejections later, Emily pushed open the door of Denny's on South Lamar Boulevard. "Have you ever been a waitress before?" asked the manager, a robust middle-aged woman named Dolores. "No," Emily admitted. Dolores studied her face for a moment. "You look desperate, dear. And desperate means you'll work hard. Night shift from 6 to 11, $260 an hour plus tips." Emily immediately accepted. That night, lying on the uncomfortable sofa bed, Emily cried herself to sleep. These weren't tears of self-pity, but something deeper, the tears of someone who finally sees herself with painful clarity for the first time. The first 2 months were the hardest. Emily woke up at 5:30 in the morning, brewed simple coffee in the kitchenette, and took the bus to Nordstrom, where she worked from 8 to 4. After that, she had just enough time to return home, take a quick shower, and head to Denny's, arriving exactly at 6 for her shift that ended at 11. In the first few days, her feet bled inside the only dress shoe she hadn't sold. Her hands, unaccustomed to physical work, formed blisters that burst and turned into calluses. Her body, conditioned only by gentle Pilates sessions, ached constantly. But something more was happening, a subtle change, almost imperceptible at first. It was a Sunday morning, her only day off, when Emily noticed it for the first time. Looking at herself in the small cracked mirror in the bathroom, she saw a different face. Her cheeks, once full of cosmetic fillers, had thinned. Her eyes, though tired, carried a clarity she hadn't seen in years. Her body was firmer, not from the expensive gym she once frequented, but from the constant work. "You're different," Dolores remarked one night as Emily wiped down tables after closing. "When you started, I thought you wouldn't last a week. Now you seem like you were made for this." Emily smiled, surprised to feel pride from the compliment. "My grandmother was a waitress," she said, recalling something her father had mentioned once, but she had dismissed as irrelevant. "Really?" Dolores seemed genuinely interested. "Yes, for 23 years at the same restaurant in Dallas. My dad never talked much about it. I guess he was ashamed." Dolores shook her head. "There's nothing shameful about honest work, dear." Those words resonated in Emily's mind as she rode home on the last bus of the night. Honest work. For the first time in her adult life, she was earning every cent through her own merit. At Nordstrom, her transformation didn't go unnoticed either. Emily discovered she had a natural talent for sales, not through the manipulation she used to employ with her father, but through a genuine empathy she was developing. "You really listen to customers," the manager noted during her performance review. "Most salespeople are just waiting for their turn to talk." Emily smiled. "I learned everyone has a story." And it was true. Every customer she served, every person she waited on at Denny's, they all had stories, struggles, dreams. The world she inhabited now was infinitely richer and more complex than the privileged bubble she had lived in. In the 4th month, something extraordinary happened. Emily managed to pay all her bills and still save $67. It was a ridiculous amount compared to what she used to spend on a single lunch, but it represented something far more valuable: independence. It was also in this month that she began visiting the public library on Sundays. Initially, it was just to use the free computer and internet. But soon, Emily found herself drawn to personal finance books. Rich Dad, Poor Dad was the first she read, followed by various titles on financial education. "You're always reading those books," commented Lisa, the librarian, after a few weeks. "Are you thinking of changing careers?" Emily paused to reflect. "Maybe. It's like I'm learning a new language, one I should have learned a long time ago." In the 5th month, Emily had lost 14 pounds, not through dieting, but from the constant physical work. Her designer clothes, the few she still owned, hung loosely on her transformed body. She donated them to a local charity and bought simple pieces from a budget department store. It was also this month that she received an offer to become an assistant manager at Nordstrom. The salary increase would allow her to leave Denny's, but to everyone's surprise, including her own, Emily declined. "Why?" Dolores asked, genuinely confused. Emily smiled. "Because I still have things to learn here, and because, in some strange way, I like this place." It was true. Denny's, with its hard-working customers, financially strapped families, and students counting coins for tips, had become a kind of school for Emily, an intensive course on real life that no expensive university could offer. One particularly busy night, Emily was serving a family, young parents with 3 small children. She noticed how they counted their money carefully, how they chose menu items to share. When the mother discreetly tucked away extra ketchup packets in her bag, Emily pretended not to see. At the end of the meal, Emily brought ice cream for the kids. "On the house," she said with a smile, even though she was actually taking it out of her own pocket. The gratitude in that mother's eyes was worth more than any designer handbag Emily had ever owned. Walking home that night, Emily realized she no longer missed her old life. The transformation was complete, not just externally, but at her core. Robert Mitchell adjusted his discreet cap as he watched from a distance. Outside the Nordstrom window, he could see Emily helping an elderly customer, patiently assisting her in choosing a gift for her granddaughter. There was a kindness in her gestures, a genuine attentiveness he had never seen in his daughter before. 5 months had passed since his abrupt departure. 5 months during which he had discreetly monitored Emily's journey through the private investigator, receiving weekly reports on her transformation. At first, he had hoped for news that she had found another easy source of money, perhaps a rich man to replace Brandon or some questionable scheme. But the reports told a different story. Emily working 2 jobs. Emily returning jewelry Brandon had bought with borrowed money. Emily visiting the library on Sundays to study finance. Now, seeing her in person for the first time, the transformation was even more striking. Emily's face was slimmer, more defined. Her hair, once meticulously dyed and treated in expensive salons, now displayed its natural color, pulled back in a simple bun. Her movements exuded a different confidence, not the arrogant bravado of before, but a quiet assurance of someone who knows their own worth. Robert waited until the end of her shift. When Emily walked out the back door of the mall, he followed her at a safe distance to the bus stop. Only when she was alone, sitting on the bench waiting for her ride, did he approach. "May I sit here?" he asked gently. Emily looked up, and recognition washed over her face like a wave. First surprise, then anger, quickly followed by confusion, and finally, something indefinable. "Dad," she said simply, her voice restrained. Robert sat down, keeping a respectful distance. For a few minutes, they both sat in silence, watching the cars go by. "How did you find me?" Emily finally asked. "I never lost sight of you," Robert replied. "I wanted to make sure you were okay." Emily let out a short, humorless laugh. "Okay? You ruined my life." Robert turned to look her directly in the eye. "No, Emily, you and Brandon ruined your life. I just stopped facilitating the destruction." Another silence stretched between them. A bus pulled up, but it wasn't Emily's. She made no move to get up when Robert spoke again. "You look well. Different, but well." Emily studied her own hands, hands with calluses she never imagined she would have. "I am different," she admitted. "Everything is different." "Brandon?" "Mexico, with some rich widow from Cancun, from what I've heard." Emily shrugged, probably repeating the same cycle with her. Robert nodded. "I'm sorry about that." "Don't be," Emily replied, surprising him. "It was the best thing that could have happened. He was as toxic as I was." Emily's bus approached and she stood up. Robert did too. "Where are you living now?" he asked. "East Riverside, a small studio." There was pride in her voice as she added, "I pay my own rent, every cent." Robert smiled. "I'd love to see it." Emily hesitated for just a moment before nodding. "It's far from what you're used to." "I'm not so used to luxury anymore," Robert replied. "My house in Costa Rica is quite simple." They took the bus together, a first for Robert, who had always had drivers or driven luxury cars. He observed how Emily greeted the driver by name, how she seemed perfectly at ease in this environment she would have considered beneath her dignity just months before. The apartment was indeed small, but impeccably clean and organized. A small folding table served as an office, dining, and kitchen. The sofa bed was neatly made with a simple but lovely quilt. On the walls, instead of the expensive paintings that decorated her former mansion, Emily had hung photos in cheap frames, mostly of coworkers and new friends. "Make yourself at home," Emily said, gesturing to a folding chair that served as the only extra seat in the apartment. "Want some coffee? I don't have much more to offer." "Coffee would be great," Robert replied, genuinely interested as he surveyed the space. As Emily prepared the coffee in the small coffee maker she bought at a thrift store, Robert noticed a personal finance book open on the small table, filled with notes in the margins. Next to it were other stacked books, all about budgeting, financial education, and entrepreneurship. "I see you've been studying," he commented. Emily nodded as she poured coffee into 2 simple mugs. "I thought it would be helpful to learn what I should have learned long ago. It's actually fascinating." "And Brandon?" Robert asked, accepting the mug. "Mexico, with some rich widow in Cancun, from what I've heard," Emily shrugged, probably repeating the same cycle with her. They sipped their coffee in silence for a moment. "Why did you do it, Dad?" Emily finally asked. "Why not just cut me out of your life? It would have been easier." Robert placed his mug on the table and looked directly into his daughter's eyes. I almost did, but then I realized that would just be another way to run away. You are my daughter, Emily. I love you, even when I don't love your choices. Tears glistened in Emily's eyes. I said horrible things about you. In the recordings? Yes, Robert confirmed. You did. How can you just sit here with me after that? Robert pondered for a moment. Because I believed that wasn't you, or at least not the person you really are. It was who Brandon and our money allowed you to become. Emily wiped away a tear. I learned something in these months, Dad. I learned about the value of honest work, about connecting with real people, about deserving things, not just demanding them. Robert smiled. I realized that. That's why I'm here. Not to rescue you, but to make a proposal. Emily tilted her head, curious. What kind of proposal? I've been watching your transformation from a distance, Robert explained. I saw how dedicated you were to work, how you started studying finance. I'm impressed, Emily, truly impressed. He pulled out an envelope from the inner pocket of his jacket and placed it on the table. This is a business proposal. I'm creating a foundation for financial education for young adults. I want you to be the director of educational programs. Emily took the envelope but didn't open it. Why? Why me? After everything I did? Precisely because of what you did, after I lost everything, Robert replied. You could have sought another rich man. You could have tried to manipulate me again. But instead, you rebuilt your life from scratch, with dignity. That shows character, Emily, and character can't be bought. Emily finally opened the envelope and examined the documents. The salary was modest but fair, much less than the amounts she used to spend in a single day of shopping, but enough to live comfortably. This isn't charity, Robert emphasized. It's a legitimate business opportunity. You'll have to work hard and prove your worth. If you fail, you'll be fired like any other employee. Emily studied the documents for long minutes. When she finally lifted her eyes, there was determination in her gaze. I accept, but I want to keep my job at Denny's for at least another 6 months, as a backup plan. Robert smiled. A wise financial decision. I think you're already qualified for the position. Later that night, they shared dinner together in the small apartment, a simple meal that Emily prepared with basic ingredients. Robert shared stories about his new life in Costa Rica, about the modest beachfront house he had bought. Emily recounted tales of her jobs, the customers she had met, the lessons she had learned. When it was time for Robert to leave, he hesitated at the door. Your mother asks about you. Emily froze. Margaret? Do you still talk? We reconnected after I moved, Robert explained. She's in Costa Rica now. Maybe someday. Emily nodded slowly. Someday. I'm not ready yet, but someday. Robert embraced his daughter, feeling how much weight she had lost, but also how much strength she had gained. I'm proud of you, Emily, the woman you are becoming. Thank you for not giving up on me, she whispered, even when I deserved it. 2 years passed since Robert and Emily's reunion. The Mitchell Foundation for Financial Education had become a success, offering workshops, scholarships, and mentoring for young adults from all walks of life. In a modest yet stylish office in downtown Austin, Emily was finalizing the details for the summer program that would serve low-income youth. Through the window, students could be seen coming and going from the building, carrying educational materials with the foundation's logo. Emily had kept her promise. She worked at Denny's for exactly 6 months after accepting her father's proposal, saving every cent possible while learning her new job at the foundation. Her desk was decorated with photos, one of her with her team of educators, another receiving an award for innovation in financial education programs, and a special one, Emily, Robert, and Margaret reunited for Thanksgiving the previous year. Reconciliation with her mother had been gradual but genuine. Margaret, like Robert, had been impressed by her daughter's transformation. A simple apartment had replaced the Tarrytown mansion. Emily had used money from a savings account her parents kept in her name as a down payment, but only after meticulously saving her own contribution. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Dolores, her former manager from Denny's, now a coordinator for one of the foundation's programs. "The students are all registered for the financial camp," Dolores announced with a smile. "We have 45 signed up this year." "Perfect," Emily replied. "We need to prepare extra materials. You never know how many will show up last minute." After Dolores left, Emily checked her phone. A message from her father informed her that he and Margaret would arrive the next day for a 2-week visit. Smiling, Emily put her phone away and returned to work. Life had not just given her a second chance. She had earned that second chance through hard work, honesty, and humility. From Brandon, she rarely heard. The last news indicated that he had repeated his cycle of manipulation with the Mexican widow, only to be discovered and expelled. Emily didn't feel resentment, just a kind of distant gratitude for being forced to confront the person she had become and for the opportunity to rebuild her life on more solid foundations. At the end of the day, Emily closed the office and walked to the bus stop. Though she could easily afford a car now, she maintained the habit of using public transportation a few times a week, a tangible reminder of her journey and the people she had met along the way. That night, Robert, Emily, and Margaret celebrated Thanksgiving in Emily's modest apartment. There was no ostentatious luxury, but there was something far more valuable: genuine gratitude and a newfound appreciation for what truly mattered. As they served the meal, Robert raised his glass in a toast. "To family and second chances." Emily smiled, adding her own words to the toast. "And to the most valuable lesson I've learned, that money doesn't buy character." If you enjoyed this story of transformation and new beginnings, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give a thumbs up, and share in the comments which moment touched your heart the most. Your interactions inspire us to continue bringing narratives that make us reflect on the true values of life. Until next time.